I've become a little obsessed with decks that have non-standard pips lately, and the Fifth Spirit really kicked this off for me, and now I can't be stopped. And I actually avoided buying this deck for a while because whenever I saw it out here on TarotTube, people talked about the pips and almost warned me about them. But they're actually one of my favorite things about this deck. I love how they represent the meaning of the card, but they've found a way to do it without people. The pips in your tarot deck are the numbered minors. They're the ace through the 10. And I think technically when we're talking about pips, we're talking about decks where those cards look more like playing cards, where there's no people, no animals, no scene. It's just an arrangement of the symbol of the suit. I'll show some examples of decks like these in a second, but I do just want to say that for the purposes of this video, I am going to talk about pips, and I'm saying non-standard pips because they do not follow a specific system. They don't follow Marseille or Picard or Piedmontese or anything like that. When I'm talking about non-standard pips, I also mean that they have some sort of message in them or a scene. There's something, I've heard people call them like pips with feelings or pips with stories. So they, for the most part, are not going to have people in them. So not Rider-Waite-Smith or Rider-Waite-Smith clone decks where it's a full scenic view of what that card means and the art is representing it in a fairly literal / symbolic way. What I've been obsessed with lately are decks where they are varying levels of pipitude, and they do have some message or feelings or scene in them, but it's not like full on, illustrated pips. Let me show you what I mean. A true pip deck is going to have something that looks like these. You can see it's just an arrangement, a standard arrangement of the symbol of the suit. It's from numbers ace through 10, and they, like I said, they follow a specific pattern. So these are playing cards that you would easily find in the United States, and there are tarot decks that follow a standard pattern. It's not going to necessarily be this pattern, but it's its own pattern. Let me show you a couple. Marseille decks follow a standard pattern, and you will not see a lot of obvious sort of scenic elements here. And though they are, decorated, this is the Spanish tarot, but you'll see, again, just standard layout. So even if you didn't have the number, based on the layout, you would know what card that is. So these are just like straight pips. There are other decks that are based on historic patterns, but you can buy as more modern decks. For example, this is the Crystal Tarot, and this is Tarot Balbi. These are based on the system developed by Picard. And both of these creators, as far as I know, were developing their pips based on the writing of Picard. So you are seeing some differences in how the cups or the pentacles, etc., are laid out, because they were interpreting what he had written about how the pips would look. I am not a tarot historian. I highly recommend you follow Taproot Tarot. You will get so much knowledge about this from that channel. But as you can see, there are some similarities and some differences, like they really tried their best to interpret it. But I would technically call these pips, not pips with feelings, not pips with stories or messages. Now, this is the Vacchetta, and these are pips, but they kind of tell a story. They are much more illustrated than the other decks I showed you, and so I kind of wonder if people who are, more knowledgeable than I am or who are particular about their decks, would you say this is a pip deck? Or would you say this is a pseudo pip deck? This is a sort of pip deck. This is a pips with feelings, pips with stories. So I'm not really sure about this one, but I'd love to know what you think, especially if you're really into this. Another more modern pip deck is the Thoth deck. And I don't know much about this deck because I haven't studied it yet. I just own it because it's sort of an important deck in history. But I don't know if this is based on a particular system, but it really, again, I would maybe put this in with the Vacchetta where there are some messages there. There's some feeling there, but it's not not a fully illustrated pip. This is the Maddonni Tarot. This came out in the 1980s, and I almost wonder if these are pips. So yes, pips, because there's no scenes, there's no story, but as you can see, it's just that one single, almost like an index in the center to show you what suit it is, and then it just has the numbers on the sides. So you know, this is 10 wands, this is 5 wands, this is 2 swords. Anyway, it's another interesting approach. I think I would technically call it a pip deck, even though it veers, off course from things like the Marseille or the Thoth or, other historical decks like that. What is definitely not a pip deck is the Rider-Waite-Smith. Yes, it has pips. They have cards ace through 10, but these are fully illustrated. They're telling you a story and essentially created a system of their own. So a lot of modern decks will be based on this deck and have these fully illustrated pips where the figures are in the same scene. I primarily read Rider-Waite-Smith, and so I have started exploring decks with non-standard pips, but that still have a story to tell. And let's get into those now. I said earlier how the Fifth Spirit was really the deck that got me interested in this style of pip, this style of deck. So I thought I'd show you a few of the cards from that deck and then do some other comparisons. This deck, the Fifth Spirit, really takes inspiration from Rider-Waite-Smith. So I'll show them to you next to each other. So here we see things like the symbol of the hand, but Ace of Wands is about like a spark of an idea, about inspiration, which I love this modern representation of that spark. The Two of Wands, instead of showing, someone planning, we're sitting here with sort of potential energy in a way. We've got the flint, we've got the match, and we've got the candle, but it's not lit yet. In the Three of Wands, we often interpret this as taking that first step, getting moving. And here, I love this. We've got 2 balloons in the air and 1 still tethered to the ground. We're just taking off. And I love that each of the balloons has fire on it. Here we have a card that is typically read in Rider-Waite-Smith as joy, something to do with home, a foundation, meeting, milestones. And here we have a very domestic scene. We've got our fire lit, but we're, home, we're safe. So as you can see, this creator really took the main idea of the Rider-Waite-Smith and then reinterpreted it completely. And I really love working with these cards. There is something about not having humans in the card that makes it much more expansive for me while I'm reading. It still hints at the main meaning of the card, but it is more open. It is really pulling out sort of the symbolism of that meaning. I love this one because we have, a bundle of sticks. Here we have a same bundle of sticks, but we're lit on fire. We're exhausted, but it's also reminding us of the fire of this suit, and that though we have reached the end of a cycle, we are burning bright and ready for the next one. In the Pentacles, a similar situation where we're going with the main meaning of the card, but interpreting it in a different way and taking the human out of the card. And there is just something so special to me about reading these pips. So for example, instead of watching the humans talk about the work, we've got their tools, but we're also reminded this is a church back here, and this is a bell tower. So lots of the symbolism you're used to if you read Rider-Waite-Smith, the meanings you're used to, but you're seeing it in a new way. Here's one of the things I mean by like the symbolism you're used to. Usually here we've got the scales, and it's on the box there for the donations. And I'll start moving through these a little bit more quickly. Some are, really clear. You can tell what's happening in them. Like they're a clear, parallel. I think, here's somebody working, here's their tools. Whereas here, again, this is sort of the feeling of that card. It's the keyword of that card, but it's, not a very close match to it. Show you a couple more decks that take that sort of same approach where they're using the keyword or some of the symbolism from the Rider-Waite-Smith, but then they're going off in their own direction. This is the Echo Tarot, and this is Pagan Otherworlds. So we'll look at the cups. Ace of Cups is often seen as, you know, abundance, overflowing, and we have two different cups showing that. And then we have the addition here of love. This is a suit that's often read as love. Here we have the 2, which is often seen as like a love relationship, connection, and the creator here showed this with the steam intertwining and creating a heart. We've got a lock and a key decorating the mugs. Over here, instead of people, we have the 2 cups, but then we have this rock formation coming up and touching in the center. Here we have, again, 3 cups, just showing 3 people, often read as friendship. And then here we have less of a story. Here we still have our 3 cups. They're up in the air, which is a helpful reminder. But then down here we have a pumpkin. So maybe we could read that as like growth. That they're adding some more symbolism. And this is why I think decks like these, like Pagan Otherworlds, are not, you know, strictly pips, because they have a story to tell. The way the cups are arranged is similar to the arrangement in the Rider-Waite-Smith. We don't have a person, but we do have that lone tree kind of separating the sides of the cups. And here we have the same thing. We've got 1 cup on its own and 3 kind of colluding together. If we look at the 5, we have a similar situation. We have 3 spilled cups, 2 upright. Same thing here in Pagan Otherworlds. Same thing here, but they're broken versus intact cups. So you get the idea where we're seeing some of the symbolism where we've got the flowers growing out of the cups, right? We have a home here reminding us of, you know, childhood, of family connections. Here we've got some flowers and other things decorating these cups. So lots of things to remind us of the meanings we know, but it's just a new view of those things. Sometimes the cards really do veer off, and I'm not totally sure what they're, you know, if they're trying to tell me something new. This one took me a while until I realized these were sort of worn and chipped cups and, you know, sort of jumbled up. And then this one, again, it's nighttime. It's bringing on the thought of the moon, maybe, the idea of cycles and passing through. Here again, in the arrangement of the cup, we're reminded of the meaning. And then here we've got the rainbow connection. Here we've got the rainbow shape with the cups, and then the celebratory like staff in the middle, the pole in the middle. And I'll flip through this final suit with all of these together, and you'll see that some of these cards are much more scenic than the others. You know, some are much more pippish. So for example, here we just have the sword in the stone, whereas the other ones have a hand. This one's got some feathers going on. There's, you know, kind of more to look at. You'll see a common, you know, story here with the crossed swords for the 2. We often see a heart with 3 swords in it here. That's a very typical way of showing it. So I love here we've got this open wound, or here we've got needles sewing it back together. Here we have a cicada waiting to hatch. We have the formation, the 3 upright and 1 laying down, repeated here. And there really is just something about these where even just removing the person, I don't know, just feels a little bit more like I can play with it. Whereas this is really going to a new meaning, a new view of that card. And I just love looking at these, and I love doing readings with them because they show these new ways of looking. I'll just flip through some of these, and instead of telling you what I'm seeing, let you have a chance to see. I lied. So smart. It's a magpie. It's stealing. It's so good. I just love the way these artists interpret these meanings and decide to show them and, you know, share them with us. They give us little like clues, you know, like here's a swan, a lone swan all on its own, and it's chained. Like how anxiety producing is that, you know? And then for our last pip in this set, we've got our 10 of Swords. Let me show you some decks that do not seem to follow a pattern at all. This is the Kai Love Tarot, and I'm including it here because even though there are scenes, there are not really people or animals in them. So to me, that is a non-standard pip. And of course, an animal shows up right when I say there's no animals. Majority of these don't have animals in them. And so, and even if it's a figure, it's just really not a clear person. And I really do like reading with these. I do think these are more scenic, but they still give me, you know, a sense of the meaning of the card. And I've said it before, this deck really makes me feel things instead of think things. And I think part of the reason is that there are not like fully realized human or animal scenes in them. Even when we're seeing animals or figures, it's not realistic, or they're not in a, you know, an actual environment that they would be found in. And I find these pips to be just amazing to read with. The Wild Unknown takes a similar approach. These do not seem totally attached to another system, for me anyway. There are some things that might make sense. Like, for example, we have a fox here on the Seven of Swords. That's using the symbolism of the fox, at least in, you know, Western European and American beliefs. But like this one does not seem attached to me to the Rider-Waite-Smith version. This one does, right? So this one does sort of take its own approach on a handful of the cards, but some of them are really easy, like this, a spider working away at their web. That does seem connected to Rider-Waite-Smith to me. So another deck that I would call a non-standard pip, a pip with a story to tell. This is the Clarity Tarot, and this one really goes its own direction, and I love it. And the drawings are so sparse, and this big black border, I just think it's a remarkable way of looking at these cards. And I find that it really makes me think about the cards in a totally new way. This one, some of these cards I think I can attach back to Rider-Waite-Smith, but for the most part, no. I think for the most part, they are doing their own thing, and it gives me a chance to really expand my meaning of these cards. This is Terra de Luz, and this is a new addition to my collection, and I bought it for the pips, which I had actually avoided buying it partly because of the pips, and now that I'm obsessed, I gotta have it. And again, I think this deck is gonna make me think of these cards in a totally new way. And what I really love is sort of the mental gymnastics of connecting this to the meaning I have for each of these cards and seeing them in a new way, connecting them to new situations, new meanings, expanding my meanings, seeing those meanings show up in new situations. But you can see that these are fully illustrated. These are full scenes, but they are not the same representation as the Rider-Waite-Smith. So I really think this artist is going his own way with this. Though it is the standard cards and standard suits, like the titles are the same, we are not using the meanings that anyone who reads Rider-Waite-Smith would be accustomed to. This is Earth Magic, and I think this deck uses a mixture of like Rider-Waite-Smith meanings, but reinterpreted, and then also just the creator's own meanings. Like, for example, this is a pretty standard view of a Seven of Cups and a standard approach to Ace of Coins. There's another ace, but here's an Eight of Cups, which I think this is not what we would normally think when we're looking at the Eight of Cups. So we've got a chance to reinterpret it in a new way. So this again, I think similar to the Wild Unknown, is sort of a mixture of standard meanings and symbolism that you'd find in Rider-Waite-Smith, but then also your, you know, a chance to see things in a new way or to see different aspects of the card. Like here, it's like the figure is the world. So if this is the globe, what's all this, right? Where are we going? Again, I just really like this new way of looking at things and expanding, and I've just become obsessed with these non-standard pips. These pips with feelings. I'm still not really much of like a Marseille reader, but these pips where it's telling me a story or hinting at a story more directly really are working for me lately. And that's it. These are my pips with stories, pips with feelings, my non-standard pips. I'd love to hear if you have recommendations for me. Like if you liked the video, subscribe for more tarot content, and thanks for stopping by.